Alright, we have got a rather controversial one today. Is Sylvanas getting a redemption arc? See, out of every villain in the Shadowlands, I think she's the one that so many of us want to bring to justice. Is that now in question, though? Because a story in Folk and Fairy Tales throws up some serious questions. Is the Sylvanas we met in Kel'Thalas the same one as the Banshee Queen? Can Frostmourne shatter souls? And perhaps most pressing to this entire thing, just how long has the jailer been manipulating Sylvanas? And by extension, us. Believe me, this all gets quite big. And, like Odin, I can now peer into the Shadowlands with the help of GlassesUSA.com, today's sponsor, who have in fact got me these really neat smart glasses. So first, right, look, I need glasses, you guys know that. Shopping for glasses in retail sucks, they're expensive, but GlassesUSA.com cuts out the middleman, offering you prescription glasses at up to 70% off, and if you click my link down below, you will get a great offer and free shipping. Now, these bad boys are the Revel Tunes, and honestly, they're pretty awesome. You basically just Bluetooth them to your phone, and through all of this, you can, play, pause, change your volume, do music, do voice assistance, all that stuff. And I was really just surprised how freeing it was to have the podcast that I'm listening to going, but without having to have earphones or headphones, which is super nice, especially in the hot weather. So that's all really awesome. I've then got these real interesting guys. These are goggles, and the reason why is actually pretty simple. Losing your glasses 12 feet up a bouldering wall, where of course you've got no support or harness, and getting really dizzy sucks. It's happened to me, so for any sporting that will go on now that the stuff's open again, got those bad boys? Of course. We have got the rimless guys, we have got 2 pairs of shades as well. These ones are real awesome. And then of course, the blue light filtering glasses that I love to use at night. So if you go to GlassesUSA.com, using the link in the description below, you'll get a great deal. And also, you can use their scanner app to check your prescription on your existing glasses, and the whole thing is risk-free with a 100% money-back guarantee. So, thank you, GlassesUSA.com, for supporting so much of the lore content we do. And with that said, let's talk about Sylvanas. We've always known that the Forsaken had scarred souls. Lillian Voss told us back in Cataclysm that when they come back, their personality actually changes. And worse, the Forsaken are damned to a, basically, eternity of pain in the afterlife. Now, that eternity of pain was given a name with the Maw, but for Sylvanas, in the recent Folks and Fairy Tales book, we actually have evidence that Frostmourne, well, literally sundered her soul. Now, compare that to what happened to Uther's soul, and you actually very quickly do realize that 2 distinct fragments of Sylvanas exist. So, let's take a look at the evidence for all of this. In the story, sister is another word for eternity. We follow the vision of somebody named Sorrow. She feels the death of her sister, Courage, and she hears a song, which she then follows from her camp to a distant graveyard. Sorrow is met by the spirit healer Elomnia, who is flanked by 2 elven statues, one labeled Regret and the other one Acceptance. The spirit healer agrees to let Sorrow enter the Shadowlands to find her sister, but on the condition that Courage leaves the Shadowlands of her own free will. Then we get this powerful picture. Sorrow is in tears before the spirit healer. And if you look at it visually, it confirms that Sorrow is Varisa Windrunner, and that Courage is Sylvanas Windrunner. It also places this story during the Third War, whilst Varisa was fighting the Scourge. More importantly, this is the first hint of Sylvanas' 2 souls, Regret and Acceptance. But the story, well, actually goes much further to illustrate this soul split. Varisa ends up entering the Shadowlands, and she takes the form of a spirit wolf, traveling through dreamlike forests looking for her sister. The forest is most likely Ardenweald, perhaps giving us some sort of hint at where Sylvanas' original destiny would have led her. Not surprising, of course, with her having once lived a life of protecting the forests of Quel'Thalas. Now, the harder Vereesa looks, the more she actually falls into a realm of suffocating ash, until she is met by the Banished One, which is clearly this story's name for the jailer. He then tells Vereesa that she won't find Sylvanas here. At least not yet. Which is a little bit mysterious, considering that this is actually 6 years before Edge of Night, and nearly 20 years before Shadowlands. But we'll get there in a minute. Then, a silver fish flashes from the jailer's palm and jumps into the River of Souls, and Vereesa knows that this is Sylvanas, and she gives chase. Then, we get confirmation of Sylvanas' shattered soul. Vereesa tells us, but was it truly her soul? It seemed only a fragment somehow, a sliver of her. I mean, that's pretty clear. But then, to absolutely confirm, that sliver actually transforms into Sylvanas, proud with her blonde hair in a braid. So we have this one sliver in the Shadowlands, and the other fragment currently inhabiting the body of the Banshee Queen. Yeah, 2 Sylvanas fragments. Steve Denuser did hint back in November that Uther was not the only one with a soul shattered in the Shadowlands. Now I think Sylvanas is pretty much confirmed, so let's look back at Uther and see what he tells us about the new lore. In Afterlife's Bastion, we of course saw Uther's soul violently torn in two by Frostmourne, with one fragment being drawn into the blade, and the other fragment, of course, escaping and ending up in Bastion. Now, the Uther that we find in Bastion is proud and stubborn, but without his legendary patience and a few other aspects of his character. Of course, we can assume that there is another fragment of Uther's soul in the Shadowlands, and this is in fact something that is confirmed in the narrative content of patch 9.1. So is the same thing going on for Sylvanas then? Is the silver fish representing the version of Sylvanas that was all about protecting the forests and the self-sacrifice, the selflessness that she showed at the Moongates? And then perhaps the Banshee Queen is embodying the aspects of Sylvanas that do have the grim determination needed to burn Teldrassil, or perhaps the emotional volatility to decide to burn it at such a whim. It certainly would explain why Sylvanas was hell-bent on avenging her situation. It's the only emotional dimension she understood for so long in this post-Soul Shatter world. And the thing is, the transformation for Sylvanas was, immediate. When Arthas marched on Dalaran to summon Archimonde, he had a moment of regret when he was thinking about Jaina. And when he had this moment, Sylvanas mocked him for having emotion. And that just shows you how callous she had already become. And that's very much something that current-day Sylvanas would do. Now, we chalked it up at the time to how rough a deal she had. But could it actually be that the new lore explanation is that her soul was shattered, that a lot of the goodness of her was in fact in the Shadowlands, with only the badness on that side of her character being the Banshee Queen? One thing does stand out though. Thenios, a Bastion character, is helping Uther understand what's up with his soul in 9.1, and that's sort of all this arc that is about Uther becoming whole again, and that's what plays out in the new patch. So does that actually mean that the same will happen for Sylvanas? Will her fragmented soul be actually brought together before the end? I actually don't think so. But to understand, we need to have a look at how long the jailer has been controlling Sylvanas. It was shocking that Sylvanas worked for the jailer, right? I mean, her knowing the true power of a Mournblade from first-hand experience, then seeing the direct control the jailer had over Anduin, that's just to name the recent things that have been going on there that are a bit crazy, right? But the thing is, it's not a great leap to see that it was the jailer who kind of killed Sylvanas through Arthas, because it was the jailer who set up Frostmourne, the Helm of Domination, all of that stuff, which of course led to Arthas' situation, which did include him killing Sylvanas. So she's working for the guy who orchestrated her own murder. Not super directly, perhaps, but, I mean, to a decent degree, right? But the thing is, it does all make more sense if the jailer has been influencing Sylvanas' undeath since Frostmourne shattered her soul. Which is exactly what happened. You see, in the vision, Varisa tries to convince Sylvanas to leave the Shadowlands, but it's against the rules, she says. And before Varisa can continue, the jailer reappears with a mace and swings it, but not at Varisa, instead at Sylvanas. Here's a quote. "She clutched her chest, mouth wide open, with no scream to fill it. Her eyes slid toward the banished one, and fear crept into their cam silver shine." The jailer takes Sylvanas' soul and then kicks Varisa out of the Shadowlands. And this whole story brings a new dimension to the jailer and Sylvanas, that it actually began long before the Edge of Night short story, and that it's been essentially based on violence and exploitation from the beginning. It feels like the jailer has been using the courage fragment, which is what we'll refer to that Sylvanas soul fragment as, this courage fragment, basically as leverage over Sylvanas, right? Perhaps even a way to directly control the actions of the Banshee Queen, part of Sylvanas. Track the advance of the Forsaken from their inception until the Fourth War, right? They gained their freedom from the Lich King because of a crack left by Frostmourne in the Frozen Throne. As Ner'zhul leaked more power, more undead escaped the Scourge. Sylvanas secretly found her own body and then repossessed it. Then, of course, she rallied the free undead of Lordaeron. Then she allied with Varamathras, a Nathrezim, suspected, of course, to be an agent of the jailer, to claim the capital of the Forsaken. And the biggest threat to the Forsaken's new kingdom was the remaining Scourge. But they never really pushed into Lordaeron. They never really wiped her out or anything. Perhaps that's because they were led by Kel'Thuzad, another agent of the jailer, a more direct one. During Wrath of the Lich King, Putris and Varamathras betrayed the Alliance and the Horde at Wrathgate, right? That, of course, rolled into the battle for the Undercity. Now, if you remember, the Undercity was where Varian first declared war on the Horde, and it was when peace between the factions became sort of impossible for the next bit of WoW's, of WoW's history. Then, when the Lich King was defeated, that's when the jailer cemented his influence over Sylvanas. She threw herself from the peak of Icecrown Citadel and, instead of dying, was brought back by the 9 Valkyr, who again were agents of the jailer. So around Sylvanas, you've got these Valkyr, you've got Kel'Thuzad, you've got Varamathras, all jailer agents. Now, from Edge of Night onwards, the Forsaken really began to just become this dominant military force. They started to expand over Lordaeron, and they were on the front line of nearly every Horde campaign. They were a real force to be reckoned with. Sylvanas, of course, still had some freedom, and I think we see that reflected in how troubled she is about Anduin's whole domination thing. There are examples. Sylvanas' genuine concern for the Forsaken, perhaps at some points. Her advocating for the Blood Elves to join the Horde so that she could basically remain a custodian of Kel'Thalas in a way. Or perhaps even the resurrection of Nathanos, who is somebody that she respected in life. So what this basically shows you is that after the soul fragmentation happened because of Frostmourne, we have most of the good of Sylvanas being locked away in the Shadowlands. I think it's quite likely the jailer is using that as leverage. And as for this Sylvanas that we've got left, well, she's constantly been played by the jailer's forces. She has been for years, but she still does have little slivers of the woman she used to be. And that's where we perhaps see some of those moments like in those recent Anduin cinematics. But of course, there is a little bit more we've got to talk about here. Alright, so before we lock all of this into the canon, there is something to consider, right? This is a vision that Varisa had, so it could just be an allegory. It could be dramaticized for the sake of the story. That is all extremely true. Now, I will say the rest of the Folk and Fairy Tales entries are stories. They're ones told on Azeroth in the third person. But this vision with Varisa is just that. It's a vision that is told in the first person, with the narrator telling us that the memory quickly fades. And this means that it's faded for Varisa, I think. So she likely right now is not even aware that she had this vision. And that means that the telling of this story in this book has basically only got one purpose. It's for us to see a little bit of the bond between those two characters, but also for us to read it and understand something rather fundamental about Sylvanas. So yes, this could be allegory, this could be dramatized, but I think it is important evidence. It tells us that Sylvanas has a shattered soul, that the jailer is actually in possession of one fragment of Sylvanas, and that he uses it to control Sylvanas, and perhaps he's been doing that since she first died. So understanding that, where does the lore stand? Is this the opening of a redemption arc for Sylvanas? That's the big question, right? It potentially could be. It could also be quite awkward of a way to do it if they really wanted to, but basically here's my take. No redemption arc, but this is going to do something similar. Think about it this way, okay? For a long time, most people felt sorry for Sylvanas. She was a courageous warrior who died defending her homeland. And throughout her history, from feeling the pain of the Sunwell's destruction, her people being slaughtered, the lament of the Highborn, through to Blizzard showing us how irrevocably sundered the Windrunner sisters are, all of that stuff. It's always underpinned by what a raw deal Sylvanas has got as a person. And that's how she justifies her relationship with the jailer, you know? If the cosmos is giving me such a bad deal, if everything really means so little, then I'll set us all free. I'll destroy it. I'll wipe the board. I'll restart the whole thing anew. That's kind of her thought. The shimmering fish fragment that Varisa chased and that the jailer consumed likely was that courageous Kalfalas defender that we all admired. When we do defeat Zovaal then, that Windrunner sister I think will find peace, potentially in Ardenweald. The Banshee Queen, on the other hand, the version of Sylvanas we've all had to deal with for the last while, well, all I can say is this. I look forward to what Blizzard have in store for her, because as far as the community seems to be concerned, dealing with that character is walking a tightrope. So basically, they could merge these two souls, get this new whole being of Sylvanas, and redeem her. Or they could give the good Sylvanas fragment a peaceful end, and then have the current Sylvanas fragment, the very angry and dangerous one, perhaps get what is due. So there you go. That is what we think's going on with Sylvanas, and if you want to check out some real cool shades like these rimless guys and these smart glasses that you can take your calls on, listen to your music and your podcasts on, then check out glassesusa.com using the link in the video description for a special offer. Big thank you to Glasses USA. Like, seriously, they really help content like this actually exist, because it does take quite a while to make. So, thank you very much for watching, thank you to them for sponsoring, and with that said, I will see you next time.